Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Black Creek Oyster Bay Service Committee meeting for Monday, February 13th, 2023. I will be presiding over an empty gallery today, so we don't need to go through the particulars about where the fire exits are or where the washrooms are. I will start by recognizing the fact that we're doing our business today on the traditional unceded territory of Comox First Nation. We're going to delve right in. The first item is a report about delegating authority of the Electoral Areas Services Committee. I guess it pertains as well to the Black Creek Oyster Bay. So I'll turn it over to the CAO for introductions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and Director, and Jake Martins, our General Manager of Corporate Services, is here to introduce this report and answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Russell, and through the Chair. Excuse me. Yes, as the Chair has noted, this report does stem from the Electoral Area Services Committee and their request for information from staff about the potential delegation of authority from the CVRD board to the committee. The Local Government Act broadly enables the delegation of the board's powers, duties, and functions to standing committees and other bodies. So it's certainly permissible. And in this case, delegated authority would broadly enable the Black Creek Oyster Bay Services Committee to become a decision-making body as opposed to an advisory body to the board. So all of the resolutions passed here generally would not require then ratification at the board table. They would simply be finished and completed at this body. So while the report outlines the ability to delegate the administration and operation of services, and in this case, the fire and water services are the two that we're speaking of, the board still would remain involved in terms of its legislative capacity to enact any bylaws. So if it's fee changes or changes to the administration of the fire service that's done by bylaw, all of that would still require that bylaw to be given readings and adopted at the board table. Staff are generally supportive of seeking such delegation, and the Electoral Area Services Committee has indicated their support for seeking such delegation as well. But in considering such arrangement, staff have also identified an opportunity to potentially merge the Black Creek Oyster Bay and the Electoral Area Services together. Right now, of course, they're two very separate and distinct bodies, but both serve as advisory bodies to the board. So the concept could be to have one Electoral Area Services Committee that covers areas D, A, B, and C. This would result in no change to the control of the services. The decisions respecting those that are respecting the fire and water service would remain with the decisions of C and D. It would just be those directors voting on those matters, so it wouldn't result in any loss of control or otherwise. It could also result in some enhanced efficiencies as far as conducting our meetings, where we can start at 9 o'clock potentially with some of the electoral or business, have BCOB items first on the agenda, or schedule a special Electoral Area Services Committee if there's considerable BCOB matters to consider, and just have those directors participate. It would constitute quorum, and so there'd be no impact in that regard. The other plus or potential benefit of this arrangement could be that there are certain times when decisions have to be both ratified by the Electoral Area Services Committee and the BCOB, and they're the exact same matter. An example of this would be like I mentioned before, the fire administration bylaw. It's a bylaw that covers the services for Oyster River, for Merville, Black Creek, other areas, Mount Washington included. So those are reports we're typically taking to both bodies. We're seeking the exact same decision, and so this would streamline that process. The other example would be the operational guidelines that our fire services operate under. So with that, Mr. Chair, yeah, appreciate the committee's questions and feedback in regards to both the delegation of authority and this concept which we've just brought to you today, and recognizing that if you certainly want more time or more information, we'd be happy to provide that.
Thank you very much, Jake. I see there's no recommendation at this point, just for information only.
Yeah, that's correct, Mr. Chair. If the committee is supportive of seeking delegated authority, a resolution of support would certainly not hurt. We can then bring that forward to the board with the resolution from the Electoral Area Services Committee, and then the board would again consider that delegation. And if there's any consideration around the merger or the joining of the two services, standing committees are under the purview of the board chair. So we don't need to enact a bylaw change or anything. It would just be perhaps a recommendation to the chair to consider undertaking that change.
And of course, as in all our services and functions, only the people that participate in those services actually get to vote on the matter.
Yes.
So not much change there.
That's correct. Yeah, there's a very seldom instances in which the whole board is required to vote on certain matters, but by and large, the vast majority are decided by just the directors that participate in the service.
So that means Director Rice is going to get the CVRD jacket now and the hat to go along with it. Actually, I'll turn it over to Director Rice. I wonder if he has any first thoughts on the matter.
Thank you, Chair. The one thought that I had was that what exactly would be delegated in terms of this particular committee?
Yeah, thank you. And through the chair. So the act uses the terms administration and operation, which are not defined terms. So it's not ironclad exactly what's included, but we've come to know and to practice that essentially most decisions concerning the administration of the service. So that could be, again, things where you're deciding to undertake procurements for certain equipment. It could be that you're budget decision around increasing resources to a certain area. Almost all matters fall into that administration operation. It's where how we enact those changes, and where it requires a bylaw, then of course we have to engage the board in that process. But the vast majority of decisions, by and large, fall into that category of the administration and operation of the service. So it's quite broad, and in our experience with both the Water Committee and the Sewage Commission that have that existing delegated authority, there are seldom decisions that fall outside, or that we deem to fall outside of that definition, and therefore want to take to the other body to consider.
I have one more question. You mentioned that there'd be a change in the meetings. Can you just give me a little bit more detail on that?
Yeah, this is kind of just in concept, but certainly if we were to bring the two committees together, so the thought would be that we could look to schedule the Electoral Area Services Committee to start at 9 or 9:30. It would just give us that option. Right now, we're staggering them, of course, with 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock. Today is a good example of that. We could then have the Black Creek Oyster Bay Services Committee items first up on the agenda, check those off, because recognizing that there's many services that are considered by the Electoral Area Services Committee, so we wouldn't want to make you wait all afternoon until those items come up. So yeah, in concept, the same reports would come forward, the same directors would be voting on those matters, but there would also be at the table the directors for Area A and Area B. They wouldn't vote on those matters, but certainly they would be there for discussion and observation purposes as well. Yeah, I'm not sure, Russell, if there's anything else to note in regards to.
I think the only other sort of twist to that is if you went in that direction. Let me step back. In the past, the chair of this committee has kind of been shared with the representative from Strathcona and the representative from here and the vice chair. If you went to this, would you run as chair, or would you be chair of that committee? Is that important, or otherwise? That's just another little difference that might happen if it was amalgamated into one. Is your opportunity to either be the chair or vice chair might be a little watered down.
Well, speaking of water, of course. Oh, hold on. Jake has something.
Yeah, and if I mentioned this earlier, but just to give a little bit more detail to it. So in those instances, which do arise from time to time, where we've got a very substantial matter that we're anticipating is going to take some time to present, there's going to be plenty of discussion and debate amongst the committee. We could look to, again, schedule a special Electoral Area Services Committee meeting. The two directors from areas C and D could attend. That would constitute quorum. And then even though one of you may not be the chair, even if you weren't the chair of the Electoral Area Services Committee, you would essentially just follow our procedure bylaw, which says after, a few minutes, the chair is not present, you then appoint a presiding member for that meeting. So yeah, no procedural issues in that regard. And we'd have lots of flexibility to try and tailor the meeting to fit the right format. But yeah, appreciate that it's certainly a change. The Black Creek Oyster Bay Services Committee has been around for some time, but this seems like it could be an opportunity to try a different format. And of course, each year the chair does consider the standing committees of the CVRD. So if this was attempted and it was felt that it wasn't working or there was some impact in some regard, nothing would stop a change back to the current process.
Well, as I said earlier, there's no timeline on this. Enough time to give it sober second thought, or maybe not so sober second thought, and see if it actually fits for what we need. The good side I see is the fact that the other two directors in the CVRD would get a window into the operations of the Northland that they don't currently have. Of course, we're always dealing with matters of Hornby and Dammen Island, which are almost always separated from the rest of the Main Sound Area A. But it's a little different there because there's only one director in those services. And when that happens, Jake can correct me, but it falls to the greater body. In this case, it would fall to the EAFC for decision making. So in other words, we all get to vote on the matters of Hornby and Dammen, because you can't have just one director voting on the issue. So anyways, I was remiss in not calling for receipt, so I'll call for receipt now. I second that. Any discussion on receipt? Call the question on receipt. All in favor? That carries. Moving right along, Black Creek Oyster Bay Establishment Bylaw 1557 Amendment Report for receipt.
Thank you very much, Chair and Director, and Chris LaRose will present this report and answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Russell, and through the chair. Good morning, everyone. So as mentioned, this report brings forward a recommendation to amend the service establishment bylaw for the Black Creek Oyster Bay Water Service to include a property, 8968 Henderson Avenue. So the report summarizes a little bit of background. So the property was part of, was skipped in 2011 when neighboring properties got together and funded an extension of the Black Creek Oyster Bay service to that area. And so a latecomer agreement was set up at the time to recover costs in the future should that property decide, if future property owners decide to connect. And at the time, to facilitate that eventuality, a connection was installed in the street in front of the property. So given that connection does exist, there is a connection suspension, as you know, within the service area, pending completion of our additional groundwater well. So that connection suspension says no new or upsized connections. Given that connection already exists, and the presence of that latecomer agreement in place, staff are recommending that the service establishment bylaw be amended to include this property so that it can be connected. I'm happy to answer any questions about this recommendation.
Thank you very much, Chris. Any discussion there? And Director Rice.
Thank you, Chair. The one question that's on my mind is that we've already allowed one. This is the second one. Is there any others that are pending?
No, not that we're aware of. And we are making good progress on development of that additional well. So we hope to be in a place towards the end of this year to remove the connection suspension. But at this point, we're not aware of any other properties that would be bringing forward for extension.
But one thing I have heard in the community is that there's some people that are wishing to move ahead on some projects. And my question would be, are we just waiting to see how we make it through the summer? Is that, and then after summer, we're going to allow new connections? Or is there any possibility of being that there's not a lot of, you're saying you're not aware of any requests at the present. I've heard unofficially there are some people looking. So I'm just wondering if there's any possibility of moving that timeline up from 9 months from now.
Yeah, no, it's a good point of clarification. What I meant was we're not aware of any other situations like this where properties are looking to be included in the service area that aren't. There are certainly projects that are waiting for the release of the connection suspension, so that don't meet the criteria for approval during the connection suspension. So certainly, yes, I agree, Mr. Chair, that there are definitely projects out there eagerly waiting for the end of the connection suspension. So what's driving release of that suspension is completion of the well, and that right now that is forecast or projected for September. So that's the milestone that we're looking for release of the connection suspension. So under the terms, it says no new or upsized connections. But there were some that were in stream at the point where the connection suspension was established in October of 2020. So some of those have proceeded, but anything that has come up since then is on hold unless they've already got a connection, as in this case. Yeah, so that's in a nutshell. So we're waiting for the completion of the well before lifting that suspension.
Yeah, because a lot has changed since 2020. And we know that time is money when it comes to building, not to mention all the impacts on the families building and what have you. So if somebody did want to come forward, would this board be able to, because I mean, in the greater picture of things, a couple more connections isn't going to make a huge amount of difference before we get the other well online. And in 2020, it sounded like a great idea, but now we're heading, towards the middle of 2020, well, towards the end of 2023. So I'm just wondering if somebody should approach me, should I encourage them to come to our planning and building and ask for it?
I think at the staff level, the direction's been pretty clear that the connection suspension is in place until withdrawn. So I think it would have to come through the committee. But to this point, we haven't made any exceptions. That might be it could be challenging to set a precedent. I think we're certainly open to if the committee were to direct us to report back regarding the connection suspension and the anticipated timing. We could look at or reach agreement on the specific criteria for removal of the connection suspension. I guess that would be an option.
Okay, because I do think sometimes, I mean, we deal in absolutisms. When things are affecting people on the ground, it's a little different. I would definitely think that if somebody had a project pending that was going to have to be put on the deep freeze till September, I mean, that's a substantial hit. So I would encourage them to come forward to this board and on a case-by-case scenario. I mean, I don't think there's going to be an avalanche of requests, but I would think that at the very least, the two directors at this committee would at least give them a fair hearing.
Maybe just one more comment is just that there have been a number of developers and property owners who have been delayed by this connection suspension. I just raised the issue of fairness that that there are others that have been waiting. So I would just want to highlight the need for consistent communication on this one to avoid any potential arguments of unfairness.
But once again, I'm trying to make the point that we're dealing with real people's real lives. Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, I just want to assure you and those people in our community that we thoroughly understand the implications of this. But this is a serious matter. This is a lack of water available to service new development. And the difficult decision that you would have if they come forward to ask for an exception is allowing connections before we have a well that's up and running and connected to the water system, and the risk associated with making that commitment, as well as Chris says, how do you distinguish from one from the other in terms of what an exception is? So it would be a very tough decision. I just want everybody to know that we take it seriously. And we have progressed this project to bring online new water supply as quickly as possible.
Well, frame it a different way. Is there any possibility of expediting the connection? Do we have contracts awarded? We're moving ahead. And of course, with any building project right now, the contractors are all backed up and we have to wait for them to get their show together. Is that correct?
I think what's yes, the contracts are all in place. The work is ongoing. So right now, the well was drilled in the fall. Our hydrological consultants undertook a pump test. They've been analyzing that data. They've just communicated some key criteria to our design engineers who are now starting their process. So within a couple months, we'll have the detailed design complete. That'll be tendered, and then the construction will occur over the summer. So we're doing it as quickly as we can. We're definitely, as Russell has said, we're very, very conscious of the impact that this water capacity issue is having on the community. So September is the earliest date that the well will be complete. Based on the work that we've done to date, we're fairly confident in the productivity of that well, which is why we're backing off on kind of the previous intent of actually being able to test the well in a summer period. So the well will be complete in September. So we're hoping that will provide us the ability to speak confidently about the capacity of that well.
Well, at the very least, let's not slip backwards on this one. Thank you.
Yeah, agreed.
So we have a report for receipt. Call the question on that. All in favor of receipt? That carries. And recommendation, please.
I would move that the bylaw number 1557, being the Black Creek Oyster River Water Service Area Conversion Establishment by bylaw 193 be amended to include District Lot 221 Comox District Plan 3642 as shown in Appendix A into the Black Creek Oyster Bay Water Local Service Area.
Well said. I'll second that. And any more discussion on the recommendation itself? Seeing none, all in favor? And that carries. Now, I don't see any new business, no addendum, definitely no media questions. There's no in camera, so I will entertain a motion to terminate. Thank you. And seconded. All in favor? We're terminated.